Sometimes God will want believers to engage in expansionist war. You just said yes.
That's not, no, look, God could subjugate the entire world as far as I'm concerned. If God wanted to come down here.
That clip is from a debate between Daniel Hakikkatjou and David Wood that took place 2 years ago. It appeared in a video recently put out by Jakes the Musim Metaphyscian. Jake is an Islamic apologist, and in his video he claims to be debunking all of David Wood's arguments. Needless to say, his short 20-minute video failed to address anything close to all of David Wood's arguments. But let's have a look at what he did do in his video. I'll start by commenting on the clip I played already. Also, I shared some of my thoughts about Jake's video in a comment under his YouTube video, which he replied to. I'll talk about that later on too.
Sometimes God will want believers to engage in expansionist war. You just said yes.
Please note that Daniel is talking about expansionist war as if it's not a bad thing and saying, yeah, maybe Islam talks about expansionist war, but Christianity does too. Now, let's just quickly understand what expansionism is. It's basically motivated by the philosophy of might makes right and because we can. It's where one government, one empire conquers another, subjugates its people, pillages, rapes, all sorts of horrendous actions, simply motivated by we just want to have a bigger kingdom. We just want people to believe what we believe. Now, I think that's pretty obviously a bad thing. So, I mean, I don't know if it's true that Christianity supports expansionist war. I'll let the Christians and the Muslims argue about that one. If it is the case that Christianity does, then I'd say it's a stain on Christianity. And establishing it as a fact that Christianity has this problem too does not make Islam any better. Maybe if we're just talking about Islam and Christianity being the only two options, maybe it makes Islam better relative to Christianity, but it certainly doesn't make Islam better in any absolute sense of the term. Those of us who don't follow any of the Abrahamic traditions are just looking at this argument and thinking, what are these guys on about? Why do they think they're scoring points by saying Christianity has this horrendous evil alongside us having it, therefore his argument's bad? I mean, if they've both got it, then they're both bad. Now, whether Christianity has it or not is up for debate. I'm just talking about the logic of his argument here. Now, what might be interesting is to see him offer a defense of expansionist wars motivated by religious grounds.
Sometimes God will want believers to engage in expansionist war.
Modern sensibilities would look at that and think this is just crazy religious ideology at its worst. We don't need wars motivated by people's religious ideologies. So let's drill down into Jake's core argument in this video. Jake is claiming that David Wood's main arguments against Islam are to say that Islam is false because it teaches so many immoral things. Jake is playing clips where David says, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is showing these immoralities so that people can be aware of what Islam is and not be fooled by the liberal Muslims who claim it's a religion of peace.
It's a response to politicians and journalists and educators and entertainers and lots of Muslim organizations and lots of Muslims, Muslim speakers, Muslim preachers who say Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance and Islam has nothing to do with any of this. That was the mantra from the time of 9/11 on, that Islam is this religion of peace. I'm trying to show over and over again from the Muslim sources that that's not what Islam is. So this is not, so notice that's separate from the issue of Islam being true or false. I'm saying it's false to say that Islam doesn't teach these things. Islam does teach these things, right? So that's separate from the issue of saying
with the
it's false.
With the subtext that look at these crazy barbaric Muslims. Are you trying to pretend that that's not the whole subtext of all of your videos?
There are crazy barbaric Muslims. There are crazy.
Because if you're honest, you say, look, Islam does teach these things like persecuting the heretic or the blasphemer. If you're honest, you say, well, guess what? In the Bible, also Jesus has also commanded this in the past.
Now, Daniel does make a fair point here. There are some questionable things in the Bible, as well as there being questionable things in the Quran. But I'm not sure they're of the same scale or degree as what is found in the Quran. I'm not a scholar of either the Bible or the Quran, so I'm not going to comment on this, but I'm just pointing out logically here that just saying that, well, the Bible has it too, is not establishing that the Bible has it to the same bad degree as the Quran has it. But also, this is a strange line of argument. It's basically saying, I know I am, but so are you. And that doesn't establish that Islam is great or true. It just establishes that somebody else or another religion also has problems.
Notice if someone,
that would be the honest thing to do.
Listen. If someone
instead
said,
of hiding it from your audience.
I'm granting what you're saying. If someone were to say the Old Testament never taught such and such, and the Old Testament did teach such and such, then it would be perfectly relevant to point that out. And you could point that out whether you believe in the Old Testament or not, whether you think it refutes the Old Testament or not.
Look at your comment section. Look at the people who are commenting on your videos and saying, yeah, look at these crazy Muslims. Look at how barbaric Islam is. Why don't you point to all your thousands and thousands of commenters on your videos and say, hey guys, calm down. I'm only pointing out, what Islam is about. We have these same exact things in the Bible. Jesus is cool with all these things too. There's no real moral objection here, despite my goofy videos. Why don't you say that?
Jake then goes on to riff on this point, reiterating Daniel's argument, which is perhaps a fair argument. If David Wood's audience is misled or misunderstands his arguments and is thinking that immoral things on the Quran mean that Islam is false, then perhaps he should correct them and say, I'm not showing you that these immoral things exist in the Quran because immorality in the Quran makes it false. I'm showing them to you so that you can understand that liberal views on Islam are false. This brings us to a point where my views on theology and morality differ substantially from those of David Wood. Later in a clip that Jake plays from a different debate, David Wood says this.
Yes, if there is a pillar of cloud right here who is performing all kinds of miracles, raining food down upon us and so on, and that pillar of cloud orders us not to blaspheme, and we blaspheme, I have no problem with him putting us to death. It's clear that we are in rebellion against our Creator.
This is a very different picture of God from the one painted by the Vedas. The Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavad Purana explain how God doesn't get offended on his own behalf and is the epitome of love, compassion, and tolerance. Smiting someone for the slightest slight against you is evil dictator behavior and not something that would be done by a being that embodies all good qualities to the highest degree.
Comment section. Look at the people who are commenting on your videos and saying, yeah, look at these crazy Muslims. Look at how barbaric Islam is. Why don't you point to all your thousands and thousands of commenters on your videos and say, hey guys, calm down. I'm only pointing out, what Islam is about. We have these same exact things in the Bible. Jesus is cool with all these things too. There's no real moral objection here, despite my goofy videos. Why don't you say that?
I think the move Dan is making here is crazy. Let's put this in context. David just explained how he makes all these arguments about immoral things being present in Islam, not to show that Islam is false, but to show that illiberal views on Islam are false, and that Islam is in fact violently immoral. The normal response to this sort of comment would be to say, no, David, you're wrong. The Quran does teach good morals. I'm astounded to see that David doesn't do this, and instead his response is essentially to say, I know I am, but so are you. It is precisely this kind of behavior that has people like David Wood and Michael Jones saying that if I were to troll as an Islamic apologist and make arguments defending Islam with the goal of making Islam look bad, I would do exactly what people like Daniel Hakikkatjou are doing. When I first listened to Jake's video through, I didn't pick out an argument from him defending against these accusations of immorality in Islam. But in watching this video, I did notice him make an argument, and here it is.
David Wood has no problem as long as the claims about putting to death for blasphemers and apostates, as long as they have miracles and clouds appearing, supposedly speaking for God, there's no problem with that. He would readily accept it. So that means it's not inherently immoral, and therefore it doesn't nullify Islam.
It appears to me that Jake and David share the same meta-ethical view here. Essentially, they both think that if God ordered it, it's moral. David gives the example of God killing blasphemers, and Daniel and Jake talk about God ordering the killing of non-believers and about expansionist wars. I struggle to see how this is a good defense of these barbaric activities. Jake's own moral epistemology seems to debunk this view.
And we Muslims believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that God created us, every human being, upon the fitrah, which is an innate disposition to know certain things, that God exists, and also certain moral facts. And one of these moral facts, that God created us to have the innate disposition to actually know, and to come to know without receiving revelation, is that God, being just and merciful, would never command human beings to intentionally target infants and kill them. That is our position. And therefore, based on this moral intuition, we have good reason to reject David Wood, William Lane Craig, and these type of people's understanding of the Bible and Christianity, and even the scripture itself.
Jake was referencing there to the story of the Canaanites, where in the Old Testament it's recorded that God ordered the genocide of the Canaanites, including the women and children and infants. He's claiming that our moral intuitions given to us by God tell us that killing babies is always wrong. Therefore, we can reject the Bible and reject this idea of God found in the Bible. I think this same moral epistemology tells us we should reject Islamic ideas and therefore the Islamic scripture for the exact same reason. So if his argument holds true and means we should reject Christianity and the Bible, then it also defeats Islam for all the same reasons, because in Islam we find great moral injustices such as expansionist wars, which basically means going around and killing people who are minding their own business just so you can expand your kingdom and your religion. And also Islam talks about killing non-believers and killing people who leave the religion. Now, those killings, I would suggest, are motivated by the internal logic of religious extremism that I spoke about earlier, where if you believe God is evil and will punish people forever for believing the wrong reason, then it is your duty to kill preachers of false religions and kill people who defect to other religions in order to discourage people, prevent opportunities from people taking up that other religion, and discourage them from leaving the faith, so that you can increase the chances that people will be spared from eternal torment. Now, I use the word evil there to describe this view of God, and I know people are going to say, well, we don't think God's evil, but we do think that some people are going to hell for believing the wrong religion. There's what's called an entailment of a belief. And so if you believe that God is going to punish people for minor theological mistakes, for thought crimes basically, then you essentially believe God is evil, because that's an evil thing for God to do. And if any being who would do that is evil. So I mentioned at the beginning of the video that I commented under Jake's video and he replied. So let's have a look at that now. Here's my comment. I said, this is a pretty weak defense. All you're doing is bringing Christianity down to both religions being guilty doesn't make Islam better. It just makes Christianity worse. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not really getting into the debate over whether this is true of Christianity or not. I'm just pointing out how it's a bad argument. Jake's response was, if that's what you think is being done, then you're an idiot, and it's no wonder you became a Hindu. So basically, his counter argument to me was an insult. I don't even think I need to explain what's wrong with this counter argument. Someone else commented saying Hinduism is much worse. I pointed out Hinduism is a pretty meaningless term. It's far too broad. It refers to basically everything that originates in India. And India is the most religiously diverse place on the earth. The diversity is because Hinduism is great, actually. It's because they didn't kill each other over religious disagreements. Muslims are often criticizing Hinduism for its diversity. The problem with Hinduism, you become a Muslim, you know what to believe. There's just these tenets, you have to believe these things that set out. Hinduism, you could believe anything under the sun and call yourself a Hindu, basically. And they say that like it's a bad thing, but actually it's a good thing for a couple of reasons. One, the reason why Muslim is so mono in its beliefs and culture and ideas is because of the sword. It's not like that for any other reasons. It's because they violently persecuted and destroyed opposing ideas and removed all diversity from the civilizations that they conquered. It is not a good thing. That's not a good way to achieve unity of thought. It's really, really evil. So India never had a religious war. They've had political wars and they've had religious wars after the Mughal invasion. So the Muslim influence has brought down some of the Hindus. And, when you're opposing something greatly, you can become the thing you hate. So I think that the entrance of Muslims into India has resulted in some Hindus fighting against Muslims in the same kind of sectarian and extremist ways, which is very unfortunate. But prior to Muslim presence in India, there was not a single religious war. There was political wars, obviously, those happen everywhere, but there was anyone could believe whatever they wanted, and there was open debate. There was a free marketplace of ideas, and that's a good thing. The other reasons why it's good that there's a diversity in Hinduism is because it's the same reason there's a diversity in university. Not everyone's doing the same level of courses. Not everyone's ready for the highest level of theology. Some people need something lower, and Hinduism offers that as well as offering the highest level of theology. I'll do another video eventually on how the term Hinduism is actually pretty meaningless and not really useful. So thank you kindly for the view. This is my first reaction video in some time. Hopefully I can start pumping up more of them. Like I've said before, I've been very busy with work and whatnot, but I really miss making these videos. And if you appreciate this stuff, you want to motivate me to do more, please let me know in the comments, hit the like button, the subscribe if you want to see more of this stuff, and I will catch you in the next one. Hare Krishna.